Hi there. I'd like to talk with you about ethics in education. So, in most professions, they hold their practitioners to a code of ethics, and this is a good thing. This is a way to ensure a high standard for that profession and it protects all stakeholders. What stakeholders mean, that is just a term that applies for all people involved. So, for example, in education, stakeholders would mean your students, teachers, principals, superintendent, those on the school board, everyone involved. So, the code of ethic keeps everyone safe and keeps everyone focused around what is most important to that profession. This is often determined by the state, and Kansas, of course, as you know, has a code of ethics. And they are centered around our values and our mission statement. And words like honor, respect, and integrity are in line with a code of ethics. It's a good thing. So, this is where you come in as a teacher candidate. You are preparing for a profession that esteems a high standard of personal integrity. And remember, that doctor will not be a doctor if they don't pass your fifth grade or third grade class. We have an opportunity with these students to really be impressionable, but we also have a requirement. We have a duty to make sure we don't cross any lines. So, we have, of course, our code of ethics. And in developmentally appropriate curriculum courses, we introduce the Kansas Educator Code of Ethics document, and it's filled with all kinds of valuable information. But at the heart of it all, you may remember where it is stated as professional educators, we are responsible for and trusted to work in the best interest of our students, school, district, and profession. So, even though we hope that everyone who gets into our profession has good judgment, sometimes people don't. And so it's important for them to know everything that goes along with this. And even if you do have good judgment, you still need to make sure you are very privy to the information required for teachers. So let's make sure that we have this down. Make sure that you are very careful when sharing confidential information concerning students. Remember that the bottom line with this is only as a must, as required. If you need to disclose that information, make sure there's a purpose for that information to be shared. I know this can be a really tricky area, so let's talk about the different areas. Academics and disciplinary records. If a student, for example, transfers to your classroom from an alternative school, that is not information that you would want to share with your class. You would consider that student as a new student, but you don't want to reveal the rest of the story. Let's talk about health and medical information. If you have a student who has seizures or head lice, these are types of information that you do not share. Now, sometimes things happen and the class will be made aware of a situation. However, you want to do your best to protect that medical information as much as you can from not only the class, but also from other teachers unless it's needed. So let's just take something as simple as head lice. If you have a student who has head lice, for example, it is important to tell the school nurse because that is falling under the category of required. You need to let the school nurse know so the nurse can have a talk with the student and talk with the parents and so on. You would also want to make that information available to any classroom where the student has been. So, for example, if the student had been in computer lab earlier that day, you would want to share this information confidentially with the computer lab teacher because they may or may not have used headphones, or maybe after an activity there is a place where they all gather. Maybe there's a reading nook for those who finish their activity. So you would want to make the teachers who have been connected with that student to know this information. Now, there would be no reason to tell other adults in the building unless there is an extreme need for them to know. So I know that's a simple example, but we want to protect the dignity of the child, the privacy of the child. And I know that oftentimes teachers will share this kind of information with one another, but I want you to know that not everyone is going to be okay with that. And we have to respect the students as much as we possibly can. And always go to that bottom line. Is this necessary for the well being of the person I'm talking with or for the child? Is this something that will help the situation? That is the only time you would share that information. Also, family status or income. If a student lives with a grandparent or the parents are divorcing, or maybe the student qualifies for free and reduced lunch, that is information that you want to keep to yourself. You would not want to announce any part of that orally because that can be embarrassing to students. Uh, and some will be very open with their information and their personal information, but that's personal. So you're privy to that information, but we don't ever want to put students in a situation where they are uncomfortable for whatever reason. All right, and of course, we need to be very careful about assessments and testing results. All right, some of the areas that I have seen some of the largest violations include test scores and how students do on different activities within the classroom. Something that probably you've all seen, and I know I saw this growing up, was the trade and grade. I know that I had many teachers who would have us trade our assignment or test and have someone else grade it. That is actually not okay to do because for many reasons. One, it's not okay for another child to see other children's grades and how they did on assignment. Also, they aren't always honest on how they grade. I have seen not only friends change friends' answers growing up, I saw that happen, or I've seen enemies count something wrong or erase answers for students that they didn't like. There is just too much that goes wrong there. But I know that it's very common, even now, unfortunately. I have so many students who will be interning and they will say, "Oh, Mrs. Abbott, they're trading and grading." And I'll tell you, we really can't do much about that. A lot of teachers can put that in the category of using your friend's Netflix password, which is if somebody wanted to take that to a court of law, you would not have a leg to stand on because it is confidential information. Having your students call out their grade in front of their peers, that's confidential information that should not be disclosed orally. So you want to protect those grades, you want to protect your students, you do not want anyone to know how anyone else did on their assignments or tests. Keep that to yourself. Now, if you would like to say, "Oh, our class average is this, let me challenge you to get our class average up," that's not pinpointing an individual student, and that is really actually can be beneficial to give them some kind of a challenge that way because not one person is a standout for not doing so well. All right, so trading grade is something to really watch. Also, be careful with this political views. Obviously, you need to really go in with a front where you show both sides of the coin or all sides of the political platform, but not necessarily share yours because it's important to let your students have the opportunity to read the information and decide for themselves where they stand. Oftentimes, there's a heavy influence at home, and it can turn into a problem if the teacher maybe has opposing views to the child's family. So it's best just to keep your own political views to yourself. I'll tell you, Weekly Reader, which is now called Scholastic Reader, they do such a great job at being very unbiased and presenting all sides of political views. Whatever story they're covering, they are so good at sharing that equally. So if you would like some helpful hints, I would look and see how they're doing it. Something that really surprised me was the religious holidays that are sometimes celebrated in schools. It surprised me because I grew up in a large district where it was against the code of ethics to display anything particular to one religion and not others. Now, if we were studying religions around the world, that would be different if all religions were represented. But if there was just the one, that was not allowed. And I believe it's because it's such a large platform of people that as soon as it happens, there will be parents who will complain, and then it's shut down right away because legally a school could be sued over this. So they shut that down immediately. What surprised me was when I married my husband, who's from a small town. I couldn't believe it when I heard the Christian religion very much as part of the public elementary school. They had not only the word Christmas used for our vacation, it wasn't called the winter vacation, it was called Christmas vacation. And there were religious songs at the Christmas program, and a lot of the classrooms had Christmas trees and even nativity scenes and nativities on the wall, which really surprised me. I happen to be a Christian, so it didn't offend me, but I thought about the children who are maybe of a different religious background and how that must feel to them in a public school. I think about how my own kids, I wouldn't want them to go to a school where a different religion was showcased and not ours. So I understand the way that can go. All right. So moving on. Well, I guess my bottom line I will say with this is smaller schools tend to have a little bit longer of a time before they have created a violation that is addressed by someone from the community or from a parent. So if you go into a school and you see this happening, you really can't be the person who shuts that down, but you may want to say something just to your teacher that you learned about this. But it can be kind of sticky. It can be a slippery slope sometimes. All right. Here is another area that can get really sticky, and it is talking about students. Remember, we definitely want to have a camaraderie with our fellow teachers, but we need to be very careful that we do not talk negatively about our students or we are in violation of our code of ethics. We really need to say the good parts about our students. Now, if you have a direct reason to talk to a teacher about a student, let's imagine you have a student who is misbehaving. Let's imagine you have a student who's talking out while you're teaching, and you've tried different things and you're not sure what to do with that student. It would be okay to go to the teacher of the grade before who had that particular child and say, I'm having trouble with this child talking out. Did you have that problem? And what did you try? What worked and what didn't work? Now, you have an actual purpose to disclose that information because you're wanting to get help from that person. If you go to your school counselor to talk about a problem, make sure it's to actually get something to happen. So imagine if you have a student who is talking out a lot or maybe kind of off for a while, you might ask the student if they'd like to talk with the counselor if they seem like something's wrong, and leave that up to the student. But you don't want to just say, oh, so-and-so has been this way. I'm going to tell you, it's another area where you're going to hear some teachers do this a lot. But be careful, because I want you to think about it this way. If that were your Lucy, would you want teachers just talking to talk about that person or talking with a purpose? So we need to be very careful that if we are talking to another teacher, it's for a purpose. Maybe your student rotates to another classroom, and you might say to the other teacher who teaches the other subject to that same student, are you having trouble what is working for you, what is not working for you. Let's come up with a plan. Or maybe you have someone who's been turning in papers late and you want to talk to the other teacher about it. But that's a conversation only for the other teacher who works with that student as well, and not for all of the teachers to hear. So be careful. Again, bottom line, is it something that is this information being given to better the student or to discover ways to have an intervention or try something new? Okay? I know that's a tricky one. The bottom line always is, if you're not sure, ask your principal which way to go on that. If you're not sure, say, I've got this information. Can I share this? Is this okay? Also, you want to find your school handbook. When you get your paperwork as a new teacher, you definitely want to read every word of it, make sure you completely understand it, and that you follow the policies of your school. Of course, the code of ethics for the state is the same way for all schools. You'll definitely want to know that too. But if you have a question, put it back to the principal or your mentor teacher, because they have experience. They know the fine line. They know what is okay and what is not okay. So you'll definitely want to do that. If you're feeling like, oh boy, this is a gray area, I'm not sure what to do, don't worry. During your student teaching semester, you will have a class, a one day that you come back to campus where there is a whole discussion over teachers and the law. So I want to make sure you know you will have more information coming. Also, there is a superintendent from Webb City, Dr. Kevin Cooper. He's great if you know him. He has been a guest speaker many times for my classes. And something he mentioned to my students was really eye-opening for them. He said he likes to drop into the schools and just do his walkthroughs and pop into classrooms and see what's going on. And one day he had done that and he walked out of a classroom and he happened to be walking a few yards behind a couple of teachers who had a planning time. While they were walking down the hall, one says to the other something negative about a student and called him a little SHIT. Well, I want you to know that he heard that and he had that teacher fired. It was very important to him that the teachers are honoring and respectful to the students. And even though in different platforms, sometimes people talk that way about children, in a school, we have to be very careful, very mindful of how we speak about our children. I know there are going to be times that you are frustrated with your students, but we have to start working now on how we phrase what we phrase. It might even be better to just say, I'm having a really tough day today, rather than naming a child and certainly not calling them a name like that. Also, in the code of ethics, guys, this is a hard one, I know, for your generation having just gotten out of college, but using swear words, using foul language is a complete violation. So what I would say to you on that is to just start now practicing when you are frustrated using a different word than a cuss word, so that you can get in the habit of not ever saying any cuss words. I don't think all of you probably do, but I have children your age, and I know sometimes they slip out, and you certainly don't want that to happen in an elementary setting. So now's a good time to start that practice. Finally, we really need to watch the way we protect the dignity of our children. There's actually part of the code of ethics that talks about their emotional state and teachers using tact. So what I will say about this, and this is just my own personal opinion on this, but I believe that the way we address students, our demeanor with them, will determine oftentimes how other children will talk with them. So for example, if you have a student, and I like to name my honorary students Marshall, which is my husband's name, and it's just kind of fun to do. But imagine you have Marshall in your class and he is just on your last nerve. It's very important that you learn how to have a poker face and have a disposition about you where you don't show your frustration. When you talk with that student, you want to have patience and be kind and be honoring, because if you show frustration, if you seem irritated in your demeanor, even if you don't use words that are frustrating, but if there's a snippiness to the way you respond to that student, somehow the rest of the class can often model the blueprint that you have there. They may do the same thing to them. On the other side, if you're honoring and respectful and patient, oftentimes the students will follow your lead there too. I have seen many times where students who have not always had a very nice response from teachers, and you've been in school for many years, you've probably seen a teacher or two that hasn't been too polite to students. And you know how that makes everyone feel bad. And again, that is not the way to handle things. We have to remember that we're the adults in the room, and we need to have dignity and integrity, and to know that everyone has a story, and that may help you on those frustrating days. But giving the students respect, I'll tell you what, they will respect you back. They will be so thankful that you're kind to them, that it's amazing what they'll do for you, because they're just so glad that you're treating them nicely. And again, it's so nice when the rest of the class will treat students who are a little bit harder to handle with respect. And don't we want that in our world? So you have that opportunity within the four walls of your classroom to create that respect. So I hope that this conversation has given you a little bit to think about with ethics. I hope you're proud of being in a profession that has a high standard. I know that to be part of our program, we have that high standard for you in our classes, and we really see that within you. And we really are proud when you go out into the workforce and you continue to let educators be respectable, to have that integrity. And it's really up to you to keep that there, to keep it by your disposition, by the words you choose, and by your demeanor. So, thank you for the important role you are playing and you will continue to play. And again, if you are ever in doubt, remember to go to your principal or your mentor teacher and ask for advice. All right? Thank you so much. Have a good day.